Hey everybody, it's Brian Von VA back at it again, talking about something controversial. DMs of Reddit, what have you banned or restricted and felt completely justified in doing? Go ahead, leave it in the comments below. What have you banned from your games and felt completely justified with? Now, as a DM, I have always tried to give my players as much freedom with their characters as they could want, as long as they fall in line with the Ancestry class dynamics. During the dark days of COVID, I was able to put together an online game with some coworkers. Working from home meant we had a little more freedom with our time and could play while working. Well, surprisingly, it worked out quite well. This wasn't really a campaign, but it was more like a series of one-shots woven together. We played twice a week for about 3 hours at a time, and this lasted us for a good 3 months. 2 of the players had played before, one of which was at least a 10-year veteran of the game, and 2 were brand new to it. Our first session was basically like a session 0, where we discussed races, classes, the world in which they'd be playing, and went over basic rules. I gave them all homework to come up with their characters, and to then email it to me so I could look it over before the game started, just in case I had any questions, comments, concerns regarding their character. Here's what I got for the guy who was the 10-year vet. What the party sees before them is a tall, about 8 feet tall, fur-bulk druid. He is covered in very short purple fur. He has large round ears that protrude from the side of his head. Although he is tall, he is also quite portly, probably weighing around 325 pounds. He isn't very clothed, as his fur covers him well enough that he doesn't feel the need to wear clothing. The one thing that you do see that stands out is a red haversack that he carries on his shoulder. The other thing that stands out, and which is both odd and unique, is this odd formation of what almost appears to be horns covered in the same purple fur as the rest of his body. But instead of 2 individual protrusions, it is instead a single protrusion that bears the shape of an upside-down triangle. Although he's a big fellow, looking up at him, they see a face that seems almost childlike, and his odd waddling walk up to the party makes him seem even more so. As he approaches the group, he introduces himself. "Hello, me Twinkle Tweet." His speech is almost gibberish and barely recognizable as common. Needless to say, he spent the entire game playing his character as close to what you would expect from a Teletubby as possible. He spoke in childish gibberish, making it hard for his party members to ever fully understand what he was trying to say. During combat, he either tried to befriend and hug the enemy, which, since they couldn't understand him, never got anywhere, or would cower in fear. When he did help out, it was only if or when the combat was focused on the other party members and he had no heat on himself. Even then, he would take time to pray to his god Paylor before doing anything to assist. The one thing I actually thought was clever and allowed was the reason for his unique feature on his head. It was a blessing from his god that enhanced his scrying ability. As long as he prayed to Paylor, asking for their blessing before scrying, what he saw in his mind would be displayed on a silver screen-like box on his big belly, allowing for his fellow party members to see what he saw. I think this was used all of maybe 1 time during the course of the game. For the most part, the other players ignored him and played as though it was just the 3 of them. He was more of a nuisance than a helpful companion. He would go out of his way to do things he thought was funny because "it's what my character would do," and no one else ever found that funny other than him. Fortunately, by the time it was all said and done, everyone did have fun, and that's really what it's all about. But from that, I had to make the first and so far only rule of what type of character cannot be played at my table. You know those weird signs that you see and you know only exist because someone actually had to have done it? Yeah, that's why I have that rule. Well, sounds like you banned a furry, basically. So, I'm not sure if this counts, but it was 2 restrictions put on an item I'd obtained due to how I'd used it. My DM gave me a magical item called the Baba Yaga's Mortar and Pestle, a legitimate magic item from the game. Sounds kind of cool. Now, we were in a plane that you could not leave, and dimensional magic did not work at all. So, you couldn't even use banishment. However, in the wording on the item, you could move 1,000 miles to a location or person you can name in a single hour during the day or in a mere minute at night. Since I couldn't phase into the ethereal-like plane it moved you through, it would instead physically fly you there. And I couldn't go to other planes even if I met the requirements. Fair enough. The real fun came when I realized two things. The first was that we often used real-world physics and science to explain rules we preferred to be more realistic in instances where we felt the base rules fell a bit short. Second is that if I did the math right, my mortar and pestle safely transported me 8,000 miles a minute or 60,000 miles per hour, which is Mach 78. I was a weapon of mass destruction if I named a place far enough away. My DM immediately ruled that even though we often used a lot of homebrew to explain things more accurately to what we thought would happen, this would be a sort of magical flight that ignored regular laws as magic often did in D&D. So DMs, whatever you do, don't expect the wizard to cause mass destruction on a near global scale when you hand him a modified magic item that's exploitable in a plane of dread. Gloom Stalker. I'm running Rime of the Frost Maiden, and in that setting, the Gloom Stalker's ability that makes them invisible in darkness is just out of control. All the other characters are sitting there like plebs with their regular attacks, while the Gloom Stalker is thrashing away with permanent advantage on all attacks, while enemies have disadvantage if they can even figure out where to attack. I have only outright banned PvP in the Artificer, and that's because it just doesn't feel right for a fantasy setting in my opinion. I do have some restrictions, however. Multiclassing is limited to 2 classes. That makes sense because you don't want to overcomplicate things or become a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. You have 30 seconds in combat to declare what you're doing or you're dodging for that round. That makes sense again. Quick actions, you want to be able to go rapid. You're not going to have a 5-minute countdown before the enemy attacks you, so you gotta rapido. Move it, step it up. Races, classes, and spells are limited to the PHP, plus one other book that I personally own, be it Eberron, Fizbin's, Mordecai's Tome, Tasha's, Volo's, and Xanathar's. Again, I can understand this one too. DM just wants to make sure that they know what's going on and don't spread themselves too thin. All good ideas. Triple Smite. Yeah, so I played in a game where I played a level 10 Dragonborn with 5 levels of Undead Warlock and 5 levels of Vengeance Paladin. It turns out you can triple smite via Eldritch Smite, Divine Smite, and any flavor of smite you want. Though it uses 3 spell slots on one turn, you can obliterate an enemy in a single hit without a crit. The DM ran crits as max damage of dice rolled and an additional dice roll. With my character's current kit along with an additional dice being rolled with magic items, I could do well over 160 damage on average with 2 third-level spell slots and a first-level spell slot. So I got limited to 1 smite per turn, which was fair. So yeah, I accidentally made a broken build. Sadly, I didn't even really get to use it because I told the DM once I did the math since I wanted to make it an easy dice roll with how much you'd be rolling. For any future D&D 5th edition campaigns, I'm absolutely restricting the Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter feats from being available until levels 11 or higher. Even just one party member with either one can completely ruin encounter balance. A variant human or custom lineage character could normally take either feat as early as level 1 and immediately begin annihilating every encounter that would normally be considered a deadly threat. Also, I may have to consider restricting Gloomstalker Ranger from being able to multiclass into Rogue at all. Anyone who has ever looked at the Gloomstalker should know why. It's way too powerful of a combo. Honestly, you could solve most of this by just upping the ante or focusing on 1 or 2 things. If a Great Weapons Master is revealed in a combat encounter, I think logically anybody out there would be focusing on that not as a DM, but more so as a logical threat. Kill the one that can do the most damage first, or the healer. I was the DM who banned Summoner and soft banned the leadership feat for Pathfinder 1st edition. Okay, deep breath everybody. In and out. Okay, I did TTRPG, but then took a break. I got back into it when my brother asked me to run this great module that was just coming out that he heard about. Kingmaker. I got the books, looked them over, and they were great. I mean, they made a video game based on the material after all. So, it was my return to TTRPG after playing 3.5, then 4th, disappointing me, and now into Pathfinder. Core and APG classes. That summoner of ours was a constant problem. Not the player, they did everything right. It's just that they basically were playing two characters, a martial and a caster, at the same time. It made it difficult to deal with, especially at high levels of play, and it bogged down combat since he had to think about what his two characters would do. Plus, both seemed really overpowered. Same reason I soft-banned leadership. Basically, the players made friends with a lot of races, and one of them made the NPC his apprentice and brought him along. So again, we had two people playing two different classes and not knowing either one that well, again bogging it down. I basically turned leadership into a feat from that point on, as something to improve animal companions or to create a crafter backup character. Now, granted, I thought several years later that maybe this was my inexperience with the system at the time, and so when one of my gaming friends at the time bought me the book for Emerald Spire and asked if they could play a summoner that merges with their summon the way that it doesn't interfere with the flow of combat, could he do that? I thought, well, sure, why not? I can handle it better. I have the time to prep more now and know the first edition system more. That summoner was a frontline fighter, and through all the floors of that dungeon being the one that ran up and was the tank of the group, and he did have high AC, but I could still hit him. He wasn't god-level AC either. What he did have, though, was the fact that I touched the summoner's actually HP only once in that entire dungeon, and only barely touched it, and I tried. TLDR, summoners and the leadership feats in Pathfinder 1st Edition were far too OP while bogging down combat. DM banned players using mind magic to seduce people against their will. When pressed for a reason, he simply pointed out that forcing yourself on someone against their will isn't called seduction and is, in fact, a felony. Yep, I'd ban that player too. Here are some things that I've banned, intentionally omitted, or tried to ban. First off, playing a drow. Nobody wants to play a drow and fits in with a party. Others roleplay being terrified of or hating them. They are 90% playing evil, steal loot from the party, backstab, etc. Gender bending. Every male player who ever lived who swears up and down that they just want to explore a new thing turns their character into a lesbian boink bunny. No matter their class, living up to the trope of Bards Gone Wild. Sea elves. Forget their in-game name, but they are basically Ariel in elven form. Gotta get wet sometimes, slow down the party, etc. The first and only time I allowed one had them ruin a perfectly good dungeon maze where the only way to get to the next room was to swim through a pool to the next room underwater. Sea elves have an ability like sonar, which I wasn't really thinking about when I allowed it. The sea elf character goes for a swim because, duh, they have to every so often, and while in the water says, "What do I sense?" Me realizing he can perfectly sense my underwater passage. Intentional game breaking. Wasn't the DM at the time, but a fellow player had discovered some obscure combo of rules involving improvised weapons, character size, and a feat or ability granted by a race called oversized weapons. The player was playing a Goliath or something and wanted to smash people with clubs and tables and whatever. A real tavern bruiser. Until they found this certain combination of rules and wanted to use a door as a weapon. Now I believe the rule was that the door equaled D12. Size was large, which is equal +1 die size, D20. Feat racial ability equals +1 additional die size. And the arguments then commence over whether said player could smash people with a door and whether it would be a D30, arguably both a higher die size and not an official D&D die used, or D100 percentile die. The DM put it to a vote. It wasn't unanimous, but we overwhelmingly voted down Doorman. Use a deck of many things a couple times. Never again, though. I don't ban it, but I never make it a quest or a Bible item. Never had to fudge rolls to prevent it, but I might go that far too. It just decimates parties. Everybody thinks, oh cool, my character might win the loot lottery. Every character who tries ends up screwed. Or the whole party ends up screwed when they try to help versus a minor death. It's gambling with character death or TPK on the table. If your players want gambling, give them an in-game casino experience or something, not the deck of many things. Phones at the gaming table. Oh, good effing luck. The younger the players are, the worse attempting to enforce this is. For any age, just forget it if a character goes unconscious or is downed in combat. They are bored and not allowed to interact. They are going to pull out their phone. Also, I do love playing drows, and I would love to play a drow, and even if you play it right, you know, it'll fit in with any party, no matter if it's evil or good. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and of course, let us know what you've banned or restricted and felt completely justified doing down in the comments below. We love you all. Please be safe, be happy, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.